Mike, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today about the financial piece. Mike Brazel has been with me in my office now for a little over a year, has been in the financial services industry in one capacity or another for the last 6, 7 years, 10 years. And over the course of the last several years has become involved with the Financial Peace program, which is a church-based program, but it really has applicability to anyone that needs to try to find some peace in their life around financial issues. Now, people that get started on the right track, that do all the right things and have the discipline to save right away and not spend too much, probably don't need financial peace. But that's really only about maybe 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 10 people that have managed their affairs in that way. And so to a certain extent, financial peace is kind of like, my wife and I took ballroom dancing once, and after about 3 sessions, the instructor suggested that we go back to the remedial class. We just weren't doing very well. And so this might be kind of a remedial way of getting things back in order after you've kind of discovered that things are out of order. But I know from my experience in the long time that I've worked with people on their financial affairs that couples, families, businesses that have a degree of confidence about where they stand financially are more productive, they're more caring, their lives are just better. And so I'd like you to chat a little bit about how you got involved with Financial Peace, what your motivation for wanting to help people in that respect is, and then we can get into the specifics of how the program works a little bit.
Okay.
So, just tell me what you think.
Sure. I got involved in Financial Peace for really out of a need for education. Keith's been in the industry, I really don't even know how long. But this industry leads itself to not much education. You've got your license, watch a video, and you get to work.
Sure.
And you learn by failing. And you end up being asked to push products that are very, very, very hard to understand. And money itself seems to be very hard to understand. Well, I went to our church offered the Financial Peace class, and I attended, and it made money very simple. And I've just said, hey, this is the way that I want to teach my clients, and it seems to be a solid way to live the rest of your life and to live and have financial peace.
Right. And so we've talked about that at some length, and as we've come to know each other a little bit better, and you've come to understand my philosophy and how I counsel people to get their affairs in order from the beginning, or to start getting them in order. We've kind of smiled, and you've kind of said, you'd really like this Financial Peace because what I tell people aligns with what the program says.
Absolutely.
And that's focus on the fundamentals, the most important thing. So tell me, maybe take us through point by point on some of the steps that you help people take that can get them to that place where they are comfortable and they've got a roadmap that they can follow for the rest of their lives, really, to be comfortable in their financial lives.
Sure. Well, the first thing, and it's really not one of the points, I would tell you to seek out an advisor that asks the right first question.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the right first question? And, I've heard questions like, how much insurance can you afford? How much are you willing to invest? How much of your safe money do you have? I like the question that you ask is, so where are you at? So, where do you stand right now? Where's your budget? Where does your budget stand? So, because those are the real places you need to start. So the first step in Financial Peace and this is a recommended system that again is taught through the church, and they, the gentleman that invented it, his first step is, put $1,000 in the bank.
Right.
And that's our emergency fund. And just so you know, an emergency is not Christmas, same time every year.
Right.
An emergency is not the kids running out of their clothes getting too small because they're going to grow into the grocery. Not an emergency. We know about all that stuff. So once you've got that emergency fund, the next thing you really need to work on, and it's the cornerstone of everything that's going to make your life successful, is a budget. And a budget is a scary thing. I mean, people don't like doing them. Only about 1% to 2% of the people do.
Mm-hmm.
But a budget needs to take care of what's called the four walls. Those four walls are where we live,
Mm-hmm.
what we drive, what we wear, and what we eat.
Right. So the basic
the
necessities
basics.
of life in American society.
Absolutely. So when you get a paycheck every month, you need to make sure that you take care of those things first. Always take care of yourself first. So, when do we take care of our bills? Well, we take care of bills after we have the money to pay for the four basic walls. So that now we've got the basics. Now we're going to work on debt. And that's the biggest problem that people have. The general belief of retirement is, when you go to some financial advisors, is that, hey, you need about 70% of your current income to survive in retirement. Well, that's a pretty weak way to figure out how much money you need into retirement. The reality is that if I pay off all my bills, I don't need near as much money to retire on.
That's exactly right.
So let's do what we can to crush that debt. And we do it with what's called a debt snowball, simply starting with the smallest debt and paying it down, paying it off, using that money, paying the next one off, and so on and so forth. And the numbers show that if you do that kind of a planning budget and paying your debt, most people are going to be completely out of debt. Think about that. Think about having no credit card debt, no car debt in 3 years. I mean, that's the average time is actually 2.9 years. And if you have a house already, then it's about less than 10 years.
Right.
So can you imagine how much easier, how much more peace you would have in your life if in 10 years you didn't owe a dime?
Yeah.
You didn't know anybody else.
I almost never run into anybody like that. But it's one of the challenges that I have, particularly when people are starting out and they're in this. What economists used to call this the marginal propensity to consume, and all that really means is just highfalutin language that means you're buying a lot of stuff,
keeping up with the Joneses.
Right, you're going to buy the house, you're going to buy the car, and I've actually had a young doctor tell me that an advisor that he was working with said, well, don't worry about paying off your student loan debt too fast, or don't worry about this. I think it was a credit card. He said, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be driving a BMW 7 and you don't have to worry about anything. Well, that's exactly the wrong kind of way to approach the start. Now, there's nothing wrong with BMW 7s.
No.
There's nothing wrong with having credit cards.
Nope.
But if you have debt and you don't pay it off in an efficient manner, and efficient really means short period of time, that's going to be around your neck forever. It's a ball and chain that you carry with you wherever you go.
Absolutely.
And it inhibits your ability to do the other things, the next step. So why don't you talk about the next steps after you've taken care of debt?
So let's imagine we have this paycheck and now we don't have any money going to debt. We've got all this extra money. What are we going to do with it?
Right.
Well, we're going to prepare for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start saving for a house if we haven't already done so. And we're going to start paying for our kids' college if we happen to have children. We want to be putting away at least 10% of our income, not the company match, just our income into our 401k. We want to use vehicles like Roth IRAs to contribute as much money as we can, And then if you're buying a house, you can set aside that. And that's the next thing we work on is buying a house. We want to try to do that with 10% down and pay for it in 20 years. And so I said, well, I can afford a lot more house if I put 5% down and pay over 30 years. Well, as a debtor, you're slave to the lender.
Right.
So you're always going to be underneath their thumb. Once we've got all that debt paid off, once we've fully funded our retirement, the next thing is, after buying a house, is, hey, let's retire and live life. You don't have to be 65 to retire, or some people 67. You just have to be in a financial position where you can go ahead and do that. And I think once you've taken care of your debt and then you're starting to put all that money towards retirement, you have the ability to live like no one else. And that's kind of the motto of Financial Peace, is we're going to live now like no one else so we can live and give like no one else later.
Right. So it not only allows you to provide what you need for yourself and your loved ones, it allows you to be more generous in your community, in your church, or in whatever capacity that you want to be. Because instead of paying the bank interest, or instead of being slave to all those possessions, you have more freedom. And that's really where financial peace comes from, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's freedom to be able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. I mean, wouldn't it be nice, say you're in your 50s and your kid comes and he's talking about going out and buying a new car, and we can have discussions on buying cars, but if you have the ability to reach into account and give them the money to go out and pay cash for that car,
Right.
look at the burden that you just lifted off your child for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And when we build a great retirement, we're not just building our own retirement, our own income. We're building our family's legacy for generations, and we're also teaching people how to manage their own money,
Right.
which our kids are sorely lacking in right now.
Right. Most people that get trapped in that cycle of debt can't find their way out because they don't know that there's really a disciplined solution. They don't know how to manage the income that they have. And so this process of going to these financial peace classes gives them the education, really the knowledge that they lack, that there is a solution. There's so many people that walk around with problems that don't know there's an answer to the problems because they just don't know where to find the information, or they don't even know that it exists.
Well, they don't even really know they have a problem.
Yeah.
I remember the first house I bought, the mortgage person told me how much house I could afford.
Yeah.
But
Instead of you deciding.
Yeah, and you get tied into their dreams for you instead of your dreams for yourself and your family. And Financial Peace is a great way to do that. It's available in a lot of churches. You can find it online. There's online versions. There's secular versions, meaning not really attached to the church. But I would start back where we started at the beginning. You just find an advisor that asks the right questions. Again, not how much can you afford, not how much can you put in your retirement, things like that. You want to know, hey, where are you at right now? Where's your budget? Hey, I'll help you do a budget. That's the kind of person you want to start your financial life off with. And it's also the same person you turn to if things are bad. Right. Hey, I'm a total mess and I don't know where to start. You start at the same place. Find a financial advisor, find somebody to ask, where are you at? And sometimes it's yourself.
So there's a couple ways to live paycheck to paycheck. And you live paycheck to paycheck the way we've traditionally understood it, and that is a person that has has any type of emergency, and it's a true catastrophe for them. Any expense that comes up, they're not able to manage. Or you can live paycheck to paycheck based upon a budget, based upon a disciplined process where each paycheck that you get has earmarked parts of those funds for specific purposes. And starting with that emergency fund, then moving to, making sure that those four walls are taken care of, and maximizing 10% at least to a retirement savings, paying down that debt, do all those things. You live paycheck to paycheck, but what you're doing is you're building that peace, that level of security that the other paycheck to paycheck lifestyle is, constantly in peril.
You asked me early on why I got started this, and I really just came up with. I remember the exact moment sitting in a class in Financial Peace taught by Dave Ramsey, and he made the comment that 70% of the people, and we were watching this on a video at our church, 70% of the people do live paycheck to paycheck, and they're one paycheck away from being homeless.
Right.
So there's one thing that financial services has taught me is you can't beat the numbers, but the numbers can't beat you.
Right.
So 70% means that basically 2 out of 3 people are one paycheck away from being broke. So I left my church, which it would be considered, I guess, an affluent church here in Centerville. And I walked out and I looked in the parking lot and I saw Mercedes and BMWs and Lexus and all that. And then I looked at a congregation of thousands of people and I said, either the person on the left of me, the person on the right of me, or myself is in financial distress. And only one of the 3 of us is going to make it out alive. So it just shows the problem is so huge.
Right. It really is. It really is. And in my practice, and particularly when I work with young people, it's really the biggest amount of effort I spend is trying to get them to do the things that they need to do right from the beginning, because it makes a huge difference. We talk about, the importance of saving. We talk about the importance of paying down debt. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that even a relatively small amount of money can add up to a huge amount of money over a long period of time if you do it with a disciplined way. And so, compound interest, or the compounding of earnings in a Roth IRA, can be an amazing thing, but it only works if you do it, you do it regularly, and you start early. Fortunately, I work with a lot of people that have the potential or already have the wherewithal to do the right things, to not get to be one of those 70%. But even in that, I have a doctor client. He's been a client for 25 years. He's a super successful physician in Cincinnati. He's got 3 beautiful daughters, a lovely wife. But every time he buys a house, it's like he pushes it to the limit of what he can afford. And so this is a doctor that makes $500,000 a year in a specialty that normally only makes about $300,000. So he's really successful. And yet he struggles to find $20,000 a year to put into his simplified employee pension. And that's because he has a fabulous house in Indian Hill, Cincinnati. But he's essentially out of balance. He's created this problem for himself that he can't really retire unless he can sell that house, that only asset, for a significant amount of money. And so that's why I really love this approach of really keeping a balance as to what you do. Make sure that, and the other part of it too is that this same doctor fell off a ladder putting up Christmas decorations about a year ago. No, I'm sorry, more like 3 years ago. And he broke like 4 ribs, punctured a lung, and he wasn't able to work for a period of time. And, it was the next week, his wife called me up and wanted to know how long's the waiting period on that disability insurance, because we might need it. That's the guy that makes $500,000 a year, and you're talking about that paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. They were worried about that in that short period of time.
Well, they got bigger money, bigger losses. So Albert Einstein talks about the rule of 72. He considers it the most powerful law in the universe. Now, this is the guy that did the E=mc². But what the rule of 72 says is if you take any interest rate, now this works on both sides of the equation, I'm borrowing money or I'm saving money, and this is why Roth is so powerful. If you divide the interest rate into the number 72, it will tell you how many years it takes for that money to double. Right. So let's say Keith walks into our local bank, who's well known for their interest rate giving ability on savings account, and he puts $10,000 in an account. Well, they're going to be generous, and this is a way bigger number than you'll get in a bank, and give him 1%. So that means it takes Keith's $10,000 divided into 72. It takes 72 years for your money to double.
Right.
Okay, I walk in right after him, and I decide I need to borrow $10,000 and to buy a car. Well, they're nice to me, and they give it to me at 8%. That's a good rate. Well, that means the money that I borrowed from them is going to double every 9 years.
Right.
So this bank is making tons of money, and we truly are wasting money. And that's really what financial peace boils down to, is don't waste money on debt, and don't waste money buying things that don't make sense. So we have an emergency fund to fix things like a flat tire or a doctor's visit. And, we work out a budget so we know how much money we're going to spend. We ought to include in that budget things to protect the big things that happen. Right. So I call them the 3 Ds: death, disability, and destruction. So death, obviously, we need life insurance to protect our income earning ability while we're still alive. Disability, the same exact thing, except we're going to be alive and now we're going to be a burden on our family and need all this money. And destruction, hey, if I total my car or my house catches on fire, I'm going to need that type of insurance protection. But there are so many products out there and there's so much noise that confuse people. Cash value life insurance with disability built into it, cash value life insurance that rides an index. One of the biggest principles that we teach is don't buy something you don't understand.
Right.
And the reason is normally when you've bought something like that, you've wasted money. And the only person that benefited from it was the person that sold it to you.
Right.
So that's where I think that you can make the most ground up in your financial picture with the right type of advisor, is helping decipher what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. And I really appreciate that, because in my practice, I've been doing this for 38 years, and I was young and dumb at one point. And I've worked hard at being old and a little bit less than dumb. or less dumb. And in my experience, I was that young guy that they didn't have videotapes back then, but I went to a class or two. I passed the test, I got a license, and then they set me loose on the public. And I had really no intellectual understanding of what it was that I was selling. I know that it was meant to prevent financial disaster in the event that somebody died, because I started basically as a life insurance agent. But what I didn't know was that there were different ways of skinning that cat. I so to speak, drank the Kool-Aid, and I did what they told me I should do, because this is what they were telling me was best for everybody. And the truth is, it is best for some people. And I'm talking about cash value life insurance. And there are really good applications for cash value life insurance. But for 90% of the population or the 70% that we're talking about, the ones that live paycheck to paycheck, it's a horrible way to insure against the loss of life and income that person might generate if they had lived, because it requires a much larger cash flow. And so, as I said, a lot of the people that promote and sell this, and the companies that promote and sell it, are the ones that are, like I said, they're young and dumb. I don't hold it against them. They just don't know what they don't know. And so I caution people when they have someone, like you said, who wants them to buy something that requires more than about 4 sentences to explain.
Absolutely, that's good. That's a good rule.
Because then there's a high likelihood that it may not be the best application of the resources that they have to protect against those unpredictable events.
Absolutely. Well, I came from spending a little time selling cash value life insurance as well, and it pays very nicely. That's why I think it gets sold quite a bit to people that don't deserve it. And when I finally understood the way that Financial Peace works, and not the program, but the way you get there, I was embarrassed that I had done that to people, and immediately wanted to correct my mistake.
Right.
So that's just it. Just find someone that you think you can trust and ask them that question. If that's the person that's going to start off by asking you about your budget, what your current position is, and then help you come up with a path for financial success, financial peace, whatever it is, that's the person that you can ask those questions to.
Right. So I try to provide people a hierarchy of wealth accumulation tools or techniques. And, in that hierarchy, you start with funding Roths, taking full advantage of 401k matches, paying down debt, taking advantage. Then after you've taken the full advantage, maxing out your 401k, and then adding taxable accounts, making sure you're taking advantage of 529 plans for college savings and health savings accounts for your high deductible healthcare plans. Mm-hmm. And after you've done all of those things, so you get 1 through 8 on the list, comes cash value life insurance. Sure. Because it is a sophisticated financial tool, but it has to be applied properly. And so until you've managed to get to number 9, probably shouldn't be considering it. So I want to thank you, Mike, for taking the time to talk to me about Financial Peace. And I look forward to working with you on it in the future.
Absolutely.